The first sign was the wolf. Not the storm, that came later, rolling across the Maine coast like something sentient and hungry. Not the dreams that had plagued her for 3 weeks, leaving her tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, gasping for air that tasted like pine and smoke and something ancient she had no name for. The wolf came first. Maya saw it on a Tuesday evening in October, standing at the tree line across the empty highway, silhouetted against the dying light. She'd pulled into the gravel rest stop for coffee, the kind of place that existed in the margins of the world, a gas station and a bathroom and nothing else. And when she'd stepped out of her car to stretch, there it was, watching, not threatening. That was what made it worse. A predator threatening was simple. You ran, you fought, you survived. But this wolf stood utterly still, its massive frame impossibly still, its eyes reflecting the last copper rays of sunset in a way that made her throat constrict. No animal's eyes caught light like that. No animal's eyes held intelligence. "You seeing that?" she'd asked the gas station attendant, a weathered man with nicotine-stained fingers, when she'd stumbled back inside. He'd barely glanced up from his phone. "What?" "The wolf. Right there." She'd pointed. The creature hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. "No wolves around here," the attendant had said flatly. "You sure it's not a coyote?" But Maya knew the difference. She'd grown up in rural Vermont. She knew the shape of a coyote's skull, the way they moved like nervous energy, all tension and speed. This thing was built like a small bear, with the regal stillness of something that didn't fear anything. Its fur was dark, black or deep gray, she couldn't quite tell. And as she'd watched, something like a breeze had ruffled it, carrying a scent even into the sealed gas station. Evergreen, cedar, and underneath, copper and smoke and wild feral musk. When she'd turned back to look, the wolf was gone. That had been 3 days ago. Now, as she navigated the winding Maine back roads toward her aunt's house in Hollow Falls, a town so small it didn't appear on most maps, where her aunt had inexplicably relocated 6 months ago, the storm rolled in, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was being herded. The rain came first, fat drops that exploded against her windshield. Then the wind picked up, howling through the dense forest that pressed close to the narrow road. Her GPS had lost signal 20 miles back, and the road signs had become increasingly cryptic. Hollow Falls, 12 mi, then 8, then 4. The stretches between civilization grew longer, darker. The trees seemed to lean inward. Her hands tightened on the wheel. The dreams had started after her grandmother's funeral, Grandmother Ruth, whom she'd barely known, a woman who'd been distant, careful, who'd given Maya odd gifts that she'd never explained. A silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon, worn smooth from age. A leather journal filled with symbols and sketches she couldn't read. A handwritten letter in an envelope sealed with wax, with instructions not to open it until the pull began. "What pull?" she'd asked her mother. "Your grandmother was superstitious," her mother had replied, with the tone of someone trying to believe her own words. Just humor the family eccentricity. But then the dreams had started. She was running through a forest, not as herself, but as something other. Her limbs were long and powerful, her senses flooded with information, the musk of nearby pack members, the distant call of the alpha's howl, the metallic taste of rain and the scent of her own need for something she couldn't name. In the dreams, she was feral and whole and wanted in a way that made her wake gasping. More unsettling. In the dreams, she was being hunted, and she wanted to be caught. A particularly violent gust of wind caught her car, and Maya corrected sharply. The road curved ahead, following the contour of a steep ravine. She could hear water roaring somewhere below, a river swollen with rain. The forest was so dense now that even with her headlights on high, she could see only a tunnel of darkness, the road itself appearing and disappearing in sheets of rain. Then, movement. A massive shape crossed the road ahead of her, and Maya slammed the brakes. The car hydroplaned slightly before gripping asphalt, her heart exploding into her throat. In her headlights, for just a moment, she saw it. The wolf. Larger than any animal had a right to be, moving within liquid, otherworldly grace. Its fur was dark as the night itself, but its eyes caught her light and held it. And in that moment, Maya felt something shift in her chest. A recognition, a call. The wolf stopped in the center of the road, facing her directly. Its massive head turned, and it regarded her with an intelligence that went beyond animal awareness. Its nostrils flared, and Maya watched, trembling, as its lips drew back slightly, not in aggression, but almost as if it were breathing her in. The storm raged around them, the wind howling like something alive. The car idled, headlights cutting through the darkness and rain, and the wolf stood in the center of the road, regarding her with eyes that were ancient and sad and hungry in a way that had nothing to do with food. A low sound came from its chest, not quite a growl, something deeper. A vibration that seemed to resonate through the car itself, through the metal and glass and directly into her bones, into her blood. Maya's hands shook against the steering wheel. Every instinct screamed at her to drive, to run, to get away from the terrible recognition swimming through her body. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Could only sit there as the wolf's eyes held hers, and something deep and primal inside her answered a call she didn't understand. Come, she felt it say, though no sound came from its throat. I can't, she thought back, shocked at the clarity of the response. The wolf's breathing deepened. For a moment, just a moment, the rain seemed to part around it, as if the storm itself bowed to its presence. Then, with the same liquid grace it had arrived with, the creature turned and melted back into the forest. Maya sat in the sudden silence, the only sound the hammer of her own heartbeat and the relentless drum of the rain. Her body was trembling. Her skin felt too small. And deep in her chest, where her heart should have been, something was awakening. Something that recognized what she'd just seen. Something that wanted to follow. She forced her foot onto the accelerator and drove forward through the storm, toward Hollow Falls, toward her aunt, toward whatever her grandmother had been trying to warn her about. Behind her, in the darkness of the forest, golden eyes watched the taillights fade, and a low, mournful howl rose into the night. Aunt Iris was waiting on the porch when Maya pulled up to the house. The property was exactly what you'd expect from a woman who'd voluntarily moved to a town called Hollow Falls. Old, atmospheric, positioned at the edge of a dense forest. A Victorian farmhouse painted pale gray, with a wraparound porch and dark shutters. Wind chimes made of driftwood and shells hung from the eaves, chiming discordantly in the storm. The single porch light cast everything in sallow yellow. Iris stood in that light, wrapped in a thick cardigan, her gray hair pulled back in a neat braid. She looked smaller than Maya remembered, frailer, though her eyes were sharp and knowing as they traced over her niece's face. "You saw him," Iris said. Not a question. Maya opened her mouth, closed it. Her legs felt unsteady as she climbed the porch steps, rain still dripping from her jacket. "The wolf," her aunt continued, stepping aside to let her in. "The way you're moving, you felt the pull. I can see it in your shoulders." "I don't," Maya started, but Iris was already closing the heavy oak door behind them, shutting out the storm with a finality that made something in her chest clench. The interior of the house smelled like old wood and lavender, and something else, something herbal and ancient that made her think unexpectedly of the forest, of pine sap and earth. A fire crackled in a massive stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows across walls lined with bookshelves. Everything was warm and somehow expectant, as if the house itself had been waiting for her. "Sit," Iris commanded, moving toward the kitchen. "You're soaking wet and shaking. Tea first. Explanations second." Maya wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers immediately, but her body obeyed instead. She sank into an overstuffed armchair by the fire, steam rising from her damp clothes. Her hands were still trembling. The pull, her aunt had said. She'd felt it in the car, that sensation of invisible threads tugging at something deep within her. Even now, sitting in this warm room miles away from that empty stretch of highway, she could feel it. A constant, gentle pressure, a direction, a need. Iris returned with 2 mugs of tea that steamed with aromatic intensity, chamomile and something sharper, something that tasted faintly of minerals when Maya lifted the cup to her lips. Her aunt settled into the chair opposite, cradling her own mug, and studied Maya with an expression that was part grief, part resignation. "Your mother never told you," Iris said quietly. "Of course she didn't. She made a choice when she married your father to pretend none of it was real." "None of what?" Maya heard herself ask, though part of her already knew, had always known, in the way that deep, ancient knowledge lived in the blood. "The legacy," Iris said simply. "Ruth was born into the old lines. The family's connected to the packs. She married a human, your grandfather, and broke the bond. But the magic doesn't forget bloodlines, Maya. It waits. And sometimes," she paused, her gray eyes searching, "sometimes it calls." The tea was warm in Maya's hands. Outside, the storm continued its assault against the windows, rain streaking the glass like tears. "You're talking about werewolves," Maya said flatly. "I'm talking about shifters," Iris corrected. "About people who are more than human. About ancient magic that's been woven into certain bloodlines for longer than written history. About a pull that comes when you're meant for something, someone, and the universe has decided it's time to collect its debt." "That's not—" Maya wanted to say it was insane, but she'd watched a wolf the size of a bear stand in the middle of a road and regard her with conscious intelligence. She'd felt something in her chest respond to it like a tuning fork to sound. "The dreams started, didn't they?" Iris leaned forward. "3 weeks ago, after Ruth's funeral." Maya nodded slowly. "That's when she opened the seal," her aunt continued. "Ruth's will included a spell, a small magic, but potent. When she died, it released a message that travels through the bloodline. A warning and a summons, both at once. It was meant for you." "I haven't opened the letter yet," Maya whispered. "You will," Iris said with certainty. "But first, you need to understand what's happening to your body. The pull isn't just attraction, Maya. It's recognition. On a cellular level, your blood is remembering something your mind doesn't understand yet. You're beginning to sense what you are." "And what am I?" The question came out raw. Iris set down her tea. "A carrier of shifter blood. Recessive, dormant, passed down through Ruth. You look entirely human because the trait skipped your mother. She was born without the mark. But you—" she gestured. "You have it. I can see it in the way you move now, the way your eyes track light differently. The pull is making it surface." Maya looked down at her hands. They looked the same as they always had. pale, ordinary, human. But beneath the skin, something was waking up. She could feel it now that Iris had named it. A restlessness, a hunger that had nothing to do with food. A sense of her own body as a vessel for something larger, something that existed partially in shadow and moonlight. The wolf, Maya said. Why does it keep watching me? The question hung in the air. Iris picked her tea back up, taking a measured sip before answering. Because, her aunt said quietly, the pull goes both ways. He's calling you, and you're answering. The question isn't why he's watching, it's why he's staying away. A chill ran through Maya that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. She thought of the wolf in the road, that moment when its eyes had held hers. The sadness she'd sensed there. The restraint. I can't, she'd thought at it. And it had left. What's his name? Maya asked. Iris's expression shifted to something that looked almost like pity. I don't know, she admitted. But Ruth did. It's in the letter. The one you need to open tonight before the moon is full. She gestured toward the hallway. Your room is upstairs, the one at the end of the corridor. Ruth left you some things there. The journal, the letter, and something else. Something you'll need to understand what happens next. What happens next? Maya's heart was racing. The pull gets stronger, Iris said softly. And the wolf, or the man beneath the wolf, decides whether he can afford to answer it. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But somewhere in the depths of that darkness, Maya could feel him, not as an external presence, but as something woven into her own nervous system, a connection forming with each breath. A pull that was far from over. The letter was written in handwriting that seemed to shift between elegant and frantic, as if Ruth had written it during moments of profound emotional turbulence. My dearest Maya, if you're reading this, the pull has begun. By now, you've likely seen him, felt him, and you're standing at the precipice of a truth that will remake your understanding of everything. I write this with trembling hands, knowing that what I'm about to tell you will shatter the comfortable lie your mother built. You are not fully human. The magic in your blood is dormant, but it's there. Inherited through me, through generations of women who made bargains and commitments to powers older than nations. You carry the mark of the old pacts, even if you cannot yet see it. There is a man. His name is Kael Thorne, and he is the Alpha of the Northern Territories, a position he inherited along with a curse that makes every person he loves suffer. He has spent 17 years alone because of this curse, building walls of solitude and careful distance. But the magic that binds shifter souls recognizes no walls. You are his fated mate. The universe decided this before you were born. The pull you feel is not fantasy. It is not choice. It is the oldest magic calling two halves of a broken whole toward reunion. And Kael, if he is worthy of the bond, if he has the strength to resist the curse long enough, will be waiting for you. The wolf you saw is him. He has been watching because he cannot come closer without risking your life. A curse, my darling, is a living thing. It spreads like poison through anyone he loves. He knows this. He has always known this. That is why he stays away. But there is a way to break it. The old magic always has loopholes. It is the nature of power. And you, a woman who carries both human and shifter blood, who exists in the spaces between worlds, might be the only one who can. Open yourself to the pull. Let it guide you. Trust what your body knows, even when your mind rebels. And forgive me for bringing this fate upon you. I did not choose it lightly. With love and sorrow, Ruth Maya had read the letter 3 times. Now she sat on the edge of the narrow bed in her childhood room, a space Iris had prepared with fresh linens and a vase of white roses, and tried to make sense of words that seemed to belong to a different world entirely. Fated mate, curse, magic, 17 years alone. She thought of the wolf's eyes in the storm, the way it had looked at her with such profound sorrow, the restraint in that moment when it could have done anything and instead it had left. A knock at the door pulled her from her spiral. "Come in," Maya called, hastily folding the letter and setting it aside. Iris entered with fresh clothes and a small wooden box. She set both on the dresser without comment, then moved to the window, drawing back the heavy curtains. Outside, the storm had finally broken. Clouds still covered the sky, but the rain had softened to a gentle mist. The forest was visible now, dark and deep and somehow beckoning. "You read it," Iris said. Not a question. "He's been alone for 17 years, Maya heard herself say. Because of a curse. Because he was afraid of hurting anyone he cared about. Yes. And he's just... what? Watching me in the rain? Hoping I'll figure it out?" Iris turned from the window. Her expression was gentle but sad. "He's doing everything he can to stay away. The pull works both directions, Maya. The closer you come to understanding what you are, the harder it becomes for him to resist answering it. By staying distant, by not revealing himself fully, he's buying time." "For what?" "For you to choose," her aunt said quietly. "A curse as old as the one Kael carries doesn't break through fate alone. It breaks through consent, through a choice made freely, without coercion. He will never approach you directly until you've had the chance to decide whether you want any of this." Maya's hands clenched. "That's not fair. How am I supposed to choose about something I don't understand?" "That," Iris said, "is why you're going into town tomorrow. There's someone there who can explain more than I can." She gestured to the wooden box. "But first, open that. Ruth left it specifically for this moment." After Iris left, Maya approached the box with something like dread. It was old, carved with symbols that matched those in the leather journal. Circles and crescents, spiraling patterns that hurt to look at directly. When she lifted the lid, the scent that rose was overwhelming, evergreen and smoke and that feral musk from the highway. Him. Inside, wrapped in silk the color of moonlight, was a silver cuff bracelet. It was warm to the touch, and as Maya lifted it, she felt it. A pulse of energy that synchronized with her own heartbeat. The moment her skin made contact with the metal, a vision flashed through her mind. A man with dark hair and darker eyes, his face carved from shadows and sorrow, kneeling alone in a forest clearing as the full moon rose above the trees. He was shirtless, his broad shoulders and chest bearing marks that looked like scars, but felt like signatures, old magic written into his skin. He was in agony, and he was calling for her. The vision released her suddenly, and Maya gasped, dropping the cuff onto the bed. Her heart was hammering. Her skin felt electrified. Iris appeared in the doorway, as if she'd been waiting just outside. "It's a bond marker," she explained. "Kael made it. It carries a piece of his essence, enough for him to feel where you are, as long as you wear it. Enough for you to feel him, if you open yourself to it." "This is insane," Maya whispered. "No," Iris said. "This is magic. They're often confused, especially by people who've learned to live without it." She moved to the dresser and picked up the cuff, studying it with obvious affection. "Ruth wore one like it once, before she chose your grandfather instead." The magic accepted her choice, and the bond faded. That's the thing about fated mates. The fate is real, but so is free will. She held the cuff toward Maya. "You don't have to wear it. You can pretend you didn't see that vision. You can go back to your old life, and eventually the pull will fade. Kyle will suffer alone, and the curse will continue to isolate him. Or what? Or you can put it on, Iris said softly, and meet him, not as the wolf, but as the man. And you can decide, fully informed and fully present, whether the bond is worth the cost. The cuff gleamed in the lamplight, warm and alive. Maya thought of the wolf's eyes, the restraint. 17 years of loneliness. Slowly she reached out and took the bracelet from her aunt's hands. Maya wore the cuff all through the night and felt everything. Sleep was impossible. The moment the silver settled against her skin, she became aware of him in a way that transcended the physical. It wasn't vision or voice. It was more like a constant awareness of a presence just beyond her sensory range. A direction. A pull like gravity, steady and inescapable. He was in the forest, close, pacing. Every time she tried to close her eyes, she felt his restlessness mirrored in her own body. Agitation, longing, a hunger that made her skin feel too tight. Around 3 in the morning, she'd gone to the window and looked out at the dark tree line, and she could sense him there, a shadow among shadows, keeping vigil. By dawn, exhaustion and frustration had wound into something sharp and demanding. Iris drove her into Hollow Falls around 9, the morning gray and cool, the forest releasing mist in languid spirals. The town was smaller than Maya had expected, a main street with the requisite diner, a general store, a library that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s, and a handful of other buildings that seemed to serve purposes she couldn't quite determine from the outside. "Eleanor runs the tea shop," Iris said, pulling into a parking space. "She's been waiting for you." The shop was called Moonrise, a narrow storefront with curtains of pale linen and the smell of herbs so thick it was almost overwhelming. An older woman with silver hair braided intricately around her head stood behind a counter laden with jars of dried plants, crystals, and bundles of what looked like sage. "You're Ruth's granddaughter," Eleanor said immediately, her voice carrying the kind of certainty that came from knowing things before they were spoken. "Come, we have much to discuss and very little time." She ushered Maya into a back room, a space that seemed to exist partially outside normal reality. The walls were covered in maps that showed territories marked with symbols, circles for packs, stars for sacred sites, crescents for something Eleanor didn't immediately name. A cauldron hung over a cold fireplace. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling in dozens of fragrant bundles. "The cuff is singing," Eleanor observed, settling into a chair and gesturing for Maya to sit. "That means he felt you put it on. He's been half mad for days, anticipating your arrival. The curse is pulling harder now that you're close." "Tell me about the curse," Maya said flatly. "Not poetry. Facts." Eleanor studied her for a long moment, then nodded with something like approval. 17 years ago, Kyle made a choice. His pack was fractured. His father's legacy was one of violence and dominance. Kyle was supposed to continue that legacy, to rule through fear and cruelty. Instead, he tried to reform the pack laws, to make them less brutal. "Let me guess," Maya said bitterly. "That didn't work." "It created enemies," Eleanor confirmed. "A rogue faction within his own territory saw him as weak. They cursed him, a dark magic, older than shifter law. They bound it to his wolf heart, so that any deep love he felt would poison the object of that love. Not instantly, slowly, like a disease spreading through their blood. 3 people he loved died because of it before he understood what was happening." Maya's stomach turned. And he's been alone ever since. By necessity, Eleanor said quietly. Not by choice. The curse only activates with true love, with the kind of bond that runs soul deep. So yes, he isolated himself. He built walls. He became cold, distant, a leader without connection. It was the only way to protect anyone who got close to him. Until me, Maya said. Until you, Eleanor agreed. Because you're different. The fated mate bond bypasses normal attachment. It works on a frequency that curse magic can't touch theoretically. Ruth believed this. That's why she guided your bloodline forward, why she ensured you'd carry enough shifter heritage to recognize the pull. So I'm not a person, Maya said, hearing the flatness in her own voice. I'm a solution, a magical fix. No, Eleanor said sharply. You're both, and that's what makes this so dangerous. She stood and moved to one of the maps, pointing to a territory marked in deep blue. This is his land, the Northern Territories. He rules there absolutely, but not cruelly. He spent 17 years building something different from what his father wanted. A pack based on consent, on choice, on the kind of strength that doesn't require domination. That's admirable, Maya said. It doesn't change the fact that I was manipulated into this situation. Were you? Eleanor turned back to face her. Your grandmother made choices about your bloodline generations ago. Your mother chose to reject it entirely, to hide it. And then you came to this town with an open heart and an ancestral pull running through your veins. At what point were you not choosing? The question hung between them, unanswerable. There's something else you need to know, Eleanor continued, moving to a shelf and withdrawing a small leather journal, identical to the one Ruth had left behind. Kale doesn't know you're here, not the full truth. He knows the pull has begun. He can feel you through the cuff. But he doesn't know about the letter. He doesn't know Ruth believed the curse could break. He's still operating under the assumption that he needs to stay away from you indefinitely. Then why did he make the cuff? Maya demanded. Why give me a way to feel him if he wanted distance? Because, Eleanor said gently, sometimes we do the thing we desperately need, even as we tell ourselves we're being noble. The cuff is his admission that he can't help himself, that he had to create a way to stay connected to you, even if he was too honorable to use it directly. Maya felt something crack open in her chest, not quite anger, not quite compassion, something more complicated. I need to meet him, she said. Not like this. Not through magic or intermediaries. Face to face. Eleanor's expression shifted to something like concern. He'll try very hard not to let that happen. His restraint is the only thing he believes is keeping you safe. Then I'll make him, Maya said, and was surprised by the steel in her own voice. I didn't choose to be his fated mate. I didn't choose this pull or this curse or any of it. But I'm choosing now to have answers that aren't filtered through other people's fears. Eleanor smiled sadly. You sound like Ruth, she said. That's good. You'll need her strength for what comes next. Which is? A meeting, Eleanor said. Tonight, at the moonlit lake at the edge of his territory. I'll send word. But Maya, she stepped forward, taking Maya's hand gently. Know that the moment you see him, the pull will intensify. Your body will know what your mind is still questioning, and his restraint will be tested in ways he's never faced before. Is that supposed to scare me? Yes, Eleanor said simply, because it should. The moon rose over Hollow Falls like a held breath. Maya had spent the afternoon in a state of fractured attention, caught between Iris's nervous fussing and her own spiraling thoughts. Her aunt had prepared clothes, simple black pants, and a deep emerald sweater that seemed to understand the forest better than anything from her own suitcase. She'd braided Maya's hair with shaking fingers and offered tea that tasted like calming herbs and resignation. "He won't hurt you," Iris had said for the third time. "I know," Maya had replied, though what she meant was, "I'm not afraid of him. I'm afraid of what happens when I stop being afraid." The lake was a 20-minute walk from the house, following a path that seemed to exist only for those who knew to look for it. Eleanor had drawn her a map, and Iris had walked her to the forest's edge, then retreated with obvious reluctance. The cuff had been singing against Maya's skin all day, a constant vibration that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Now, as she approached the water's edge, it was singing so loudly she could barely think. The lake was vast and still, the moon's reflection so perfect it created the illusion of two moons, one above, one below, separated only by the thin membrane of water. The forest surrounded it on all sides, ancient pines reaching toward the sky like prayers. Mist rose from the water in ethereal spirals, and the air smelled like deep earth and starlight and him. She wasn't alone. He stood at the opposite end of the lake, silhouetted against the moonlight, human-shaped but somehow more than human, broad-shouldered, tall, with the kind of stillness that came from absolute control. Even at this distance, she could feel his attention on her like a physical force. Kyle. His name in her mind felt like recognition, like coming home to a place she'd never been. He didn't move. She could sense his internal struggle like a live wire, the need to cross the distance between them warring with the iron discipline that kept him rooted in place. The curse, she realized. He was holding it at bay through sheer force of will, terrified that any movement toward her would activate it. So Maya moved instead. She walked along the lake's edge, closing the distance slowly. With each step, she felt him more acutely, not just emotionally, but physically. The cuff pulsed against her wrist, and she could sense his heartbeat through it, rapid and strained. His breathing. The exact moment his control began to fracture. When she was close enough to see his face, she stopped. He was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Dark eyes that held centuries of sorrow. Cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. His hair was black as the wolf's fur, and his skin carried marks. Not scars, but something else. Ritual symbols, she realized. Magic written into his flesh as anchors, probably to help him maintain control. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and rough, as if he hadn't spoken in weeks. "I told Eleanor. I gave very specific instructions." "She sent me anyway," Maya interrupted. "Because I asked her to. Because I'm tired of being protected from my own choices." "You don't understand what you're choosing," Kael said, and the anguish in his voice was so raw it made her breath catch. "The curse doesn't care about your agency. It doesn't care about your consent or your understanding. It will poison you the same way it poisoned everyone else I've ever—" He stopped abruptly, as if he'd said too much. "Everyone else you've ever loved," Maya finished for him. "Ruth warned me." Eleanor explained it. "I know about the 3 people. I know about the 17 years. I know you've been alone because you believed it was the only way to protect people." "Then you understand why you need to leave," Kyle said, but he didn't move away. If anything, his body had shifted slightly toward her, a betrayal of his own words. "Go back to your aunt. Go back to your old life. Forget about the pull. It will fade eventually." "You don't believe that," Maya said. It doesn't matter what I believe, he replied harshly. It matters what I can control. And I cannot. His hands clenched into fists. I cannot be near you without wanting things that will destroy you. Maya took a step closer. She was near enough now to smell him, that evergreen and smoke scent mixed with something uniquely him, something that made her body respond in ways she'd never experienced. Heat pooled low in her belly. Her skin felt electric. Show me, she said quietly. What? Show me the curse, Maya said. Show me what you're so afraid of. No, Kyle said immediately, stepping back. The movement was jerky, desperate. You don't ask me to do that. Why not? She advanced as he retreated, drawn to him by something deeper than logic. If it's as dangerous as you say, if even looking at it would prove your point, then show me. Prove to me that I should be afraid. I am trying to save your life, Kyle said, his voice cracking. I am trying to be stronger than what I am, and you're making it impossible. Good, Maya said fiercely. I don't want you to be strong. I want you to be honest. He stopped at the lake's edge, trapped between her and the water. For a moment, she saw him truly waver, saw the moment his carefully constructed control began to shatter. His shoulders heaved, his dark eyes met hers, and they were luminous with tears he wouldn't let fall. If I lose control, he said hoarsely, if the curse activates and I hurt you, there's no taking that back. There's no forgiveness that heals it. You would suffer, slowly, and I would have to watch it happen knowing I caused it. Is that what you want? To test whether the bond is worth that price? I want to know if you're worth fighting for, Maya said simply. And you won't let me decide that because you've already decided my answer for me. She stepped closer, until there was barely a foot of distance between them. The cuff was burning against her wrist now, vibrating with an energy that bordered on painful. She could feel his pulse accelerating, could sense the wolf beneath his skin pressing toward the surface. Maya, he said, and her name in his voice was a prayer and a curse. Please. No, she whispered, and she reached out and took his hand. The moment her skin touched his, the world exploded into sensation. Through the contact, she felt everything, his loneliness, his hunger, his desperate love for a sister who died because of him, his iron determination to never let that happen again. She felt the curse like a living thing, dark and patient and waiting in his blood for any excuse to activate. And underneath it all, she felt his bondmate's soul recognizing hers. Kyle gasped, his hands spasming around hers, and for just a moment, she saw his control truly slip. His body began to shift, shadows bleeding across his skin, the beginnings of transformation rising to the surface. Then, with visible effort, he pulled back. The shadows receded. The shift stalled halfway through, leaving him gasping and trembling. I can't, he said desperately. I can't do this to you. But he didn't let go of her hand. They stood at the lake's edge with their hands joined and the curse thrashing between them like a living thing caught in a cage. Maya could feel it now, truly feel it. Not as metaphor or concept, but as a dark, writhing presence in Kyle's blood, desperate to spread, to poison, to consume. It pressed against the point where their skin met, testing the boundaries of the fated mate bond, like water seeking cracks in a dam. But the bond held. This is impossible, Kyle whispered, staring at their joined hands as if they were an optical illusion that would vanish if he looked away. The curse should be activating. It should be spreading through you right now. I should feel it taking hold. But you don't, Maya said. She could feel his racing heartbeat through their connection. The shock of discovering that his 17-year assumption might be wrong. Why? I don't know. Kyle's voice was raw. The curse was designed to activate with love bonds, deep attachment, soul connection. The fated mate bond is supposed to be the strongest connection of all, which is why I've stayed away, why I've kept the distance. But maybe, Maya interrupted, pulling slightly on his hand to make him look at her. The curse recognizes the difference between possession and partnership, between love that dominates and love that honors choice. Kael's expression shifted. Pain, hope, fear, all warring across his features. You're theorizing based on 30 seconds of contact. We don't know what happens if we let this bond fully activate. No, Maya agreed. We don't. But I know what happens if we don't. You spend another 17 years alone, and I spend the rest of my life knowing I was too afraid to fight for you. That's not fair, Kael said, but his grip on her hand tightened. You're not fighting for me. You're fighting against the caution of people who love you. I'm fighting for the truth, Maya said. She turned their joined hands over, studying the place where skin met skin, expecting to see the curse visibly spreading. Instead, she saw something else, thin threads of silver light woven between them, binding their connection. What is that? Kael followed her gaze, and she felt him go very still. The bond, he said softly. I've never seen it before. The curse has always blocked it, corrupted it. But with you... He trailed off, looking almost afraid to believe what he was witnessing. Tell me about the curse, Maya said. The real truth, not the sanitized version Eleanor gave me. Who made it? How? And why haven't you tried to break it before? For a long moment, Kael didn't answer. The lake reflected the moon above them, and the mist seemed to grow thicker, as if the very atmosphere was responding to the intensity of the moment. Finally, he exhaled, a breath that sounded like surrender. The curse was made by the Corvus Pack, he said quietly, a faction of my own territory that split during my father's reign. My father was a tyrant. He ruled through fear and violence, and he had many loyal followers who thrived under that system. When I took control and tried to implement new laws, new ways of leading, the Corvus saw it as weakness. They cursed you, Maya said, understanding. 3 of them worked the magic together, Kyle continued. It was old magic, forbidden even by pack standards. They bound it to my heart center, my wolf soul, so that any person I truly loved would become infected. It started slowly, with my sister Marin. I didn't realize what was happening until the symptoms became obvious. The fever, the weakness, the way her body began to reject the shift. His voice cracked on the last word. She died, Maya said gently. She begged me to let her go, Kael said, and the pain in his words was so profound it made her chest ache. She knew what was happening. She felt the curse in her blood and asked me to release her from the bond, to sever our connection so it would stop spreading. But I was arrogant. I thought I could fight it. I thought love was strong enough. He laughed bitterly. Love wasn't strong enough. Who else? Maya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. My closest advisor, a man I trusted as much as I've ever trusted anyone, and a woman from the Southern Territory who I was considering bonding with before the curse became obvious. Kyle's hand spasmed in hers, and she felt the curse spike, agitated by the emotional turbulence. 3 people, 3 deaths, all because I couldn't accept that some things are too powerful to overcome through will alone. So you isolated yourself, Maya said. It was the only choice that made sense, Kael said. The curse feeds on attachment. If I had no one close to me, it had no one to poison. It was sustainable. Not happy, but sustainable. Until the bond started pulling, Maya said. Until you were born, Kael corrected, and the raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. The moment you entered the world, the bond began forming. I felt it, just barely, a thread of connection that I couldn't sever no matter how hard I tried. Over the years, it grew stronger. By the time you turned 18, I could feel your presence in my territory, even though you'd never been here. I could sense your emotions, your growth, your becoming. That's why you've been watching, Maya realized. It's why I've been torture, Kael said harshly. Every day, fighting the pull. Every night, feeling you closer. And then your grandmother died, and the letter released, and the pull intensified 1,000-fold. I couldn't stay away anymore. I couldn't pretend I didn't feel you in every part of my being. He released her hand, stepping back slightly. The separation made her ache, but she could see him fighting it, fighting himself. The curse is still there, he said. Just because the bond seems to be protecting you doesn't mean it's gone. And I don't know what happens if we proceed further, if we try to deepen the connection. I don't know if the protection will hold, or if at some point it will break down and you'll start experiencing the symptoms my sister experienced. Then we find out, Maya said. Together. Not through distance and fear, but through proximity and choice. That's reckless, Kael said. Yes, Maya agreed. But I'd rather be reckless with you than safe without you. He looked at her for a long moment, and she could feel the war happening inside him, between the protective alpha who'd spent 17 years sacrificing his own happiness, and the mate soul who recognized her as his missing half. If anything happens to you, he said finally, if the curse shows even a hint of spreading, you tell me immediately. No hiding it. No protecting me from the consequences. You promise me. I promise, Maya said. Kael reached for her again, and this time when their hands met, the silver threads blazed brighter, weaving together in patterns that looked almost like writing, like a contract being drawn in light. The curse shrieked silently against the bond. And somewhere deep in the forest, the wolf recognized its mate. 3 days. That was how long Maya had been in Kyle's territory, moving between her aunt's house and the hidden cabin he'd prepared for her, a space that existed in the margins between human civilization and packlands. 3 days of stolen moments, hands joined across tables, conversations that stretched into the night. The careful exploration of a bond that grew stronger with each shared breath. 3 days before everything shattered. The first sign was subtle, a tremor in her hands that came and went, a moment where her vision blurred at the edges. She'd hidden it from Kael because she could see the fear in his eyes every time he looked at her, could feel the way he was bracing himself for catastrophe. The curse was active again. She could sense it through the bond, pressing against the protection of the mate connection, like something testing a locked door. It was only a matter of time before it found a weakness. On the third night, lying beside him in the cabin's main room, with the fireplace casting dancing shadows across their bodies, Maya felt it, a heat in her blood that had nothing to do with proximity to Kael and everything to do with the poison spreading through her veins. She didn't tell him. Instead, she waited until he slept, then slipped out into the forest. The pull between them screamed with distance. Even a few 100 yards felt like being torn in half, but she forced herself to move deeper into the darkness. If the curse was going to activate fully, If she was going to experience what his sister and the others had experienced, she wouldn't do it while he was watching. She wouldn't give the curse the satisfaction of poisoning him with guilt on top of everything else. The forest at night was different than it was in daylight. More alive, more aware. She could feel the presence of the pack in the distance. Kyle's territory extended for miles. And there were other shifters here, other wolves bound to his leadership. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it filled her with dread. By the time she reached the old sanctuary, an abandoned stone chapel that Eleanor had mentioned existed somewhere on Packlands, her fever had spiked to something dangerously high. Her skin burned and froze in alternating waves. Her body felt like it was trying to shift, like her human form was becoming a cage too small for whatever was trying to claw its way out. She collapsed against the chapel's cold stone wall, gasping. "No," she whispered to the darkness. "Not like this. Not where he can find me." But the bond was a living thing, and it was screaming. She felt him the moment he woke and realized she was gone. The shock, the panic, the way his alpha mind reached out through the territory searching for her presence. She tried to dampen the bond, to hide herself, but the curse's poison made her glow like a beacon to anyone looking hard enough. He found her in less than 10 minutes. Kyle came through the chapel door in partial shift, caught between human and wolf, his body halfway transformed, his eyes golden and wild with terror. When he saw her, he made a sound that was half growl, half anguish. "No," he said, and the word was barely human. "No, no, no." "Don't touch me," Maya gasped, though every part of her wanted exactly that. The fever was consuming her, and his proximity made it worse, not because of the curse, but because her body recognized him as the source of her pain and wanted to either cling to him or push him away with all her strength. "Kyle, you can't. If the curse is spreading." "It's spreading because you ran from me," he snarled, and the raw accusation in his voice cut deeper than any blade. He forced the shift to reverse, pulling himself back into human form through obvious effort, his body shaking with the strain. "You ran because you didn't trust me to handle it. You didn't trust the bond." "I trusted it too much," Maya cried out. The fever had her hallucinating at the edges now, her vision fragmenting into shards of light and darkness. "I can feel it, Kale. I can feel the curse eating through me. And I know what that means. I know what comes next." "You don't know anything," Kyle said, but his voice had shifted from anger to something far more dangerous, despair. He moved toward her despite her warning, and she didn't have the strength to fight him. He knelt in front of her, his hands hovering over her body as if afraid to touch her. "You're in shock. The fever is making you catastrophize." "Your sister said the same things," Maya interrupted, her breath coming in short gasps. "Eleanor told me. She said your sister denied the symptoms right up until her body started rejecting the shift. She said Marin asked you to let her go because she knew, that there was no coming back from this." "That was different," Kyle said desperately. "The bond is different. You're not like the others. The mate connection is supposed to be stronger." "What if it's not?" Maya said, and the question hung between them like a sword. "What if the bond just makes the poison spread faster because we're connected so deeply? What if by bonding with you, I've guaranteed the curse will consume me more thoroughly than it consumed anyone else?" "Stop," Kyle said hoarsely. "Stop talking like that. I won't accept that. I won't." "You have to," Maya said. The pain was becoming unbearable now, radiating from her center outward. She could feel her own wolf trying to emerge, trying to transform to escape the human body that was rejecting it. "You have to accept that this was always the price, that maybe the bond isn't strong enough to break the curse." Maybe it just means we both suffer instead of you suffering alone. Then we suffer, Kael said fiercely, and finally he touched her, his large hands cradling her face. His skin was cool against her burning cheeks. We suffer together, and we find a way through it. That's what bonded mates do. They face the darkness as one entity, not as separate people trying to protect each other from pain. You sound like Ruth, Maya whispered. I sound like someone who's been alone for 17 years and has no intention of losing you now, Kael said. He pulled her against his chest, and the contact was both agony and relief. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, a rhythm she wanted to sink her own to. The curse wants us to believe it's stronger than the bond. It wants us to surrender to fear. But I didn't spend 17 years building a pack based on new laws and new ways just to give up when it matters most. What are you saying? Maya asked. I'm saying, Kael said quietly, that there's another way to break this curse, not through distance and isolation, through the one thing the original magic never accounted for. What? Consent, he said. Full, absolute, mutual consent. The curse was designed to poison love that's one-sided or hidden. But if we complete the bond, if we make the choice to bind ourselves completely, not out of fate or destiny, but out of deliberate will, the magic might recognize that as something it can't infect. That's a theory, Maya said, fighting through the fever. It could kill us both. Yes, Kael agreed, but it's a choice. And I'd rather die trying to save you than live knowing I let you slip away because I was too afraid. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and his golden eyes were fierce and determined and terrifyingly alive. Bond with me, he said. Not because fate demands it, because you choose it, because I choose it. And let's find out if love that's freely given is strong enough to burn through even ancient curses. The bond-completing ritual didn't have words. That was what surprised Maya most. That something so profound, so fundamental to the core of what they were, could happen in silence. Kael had carried her from the chapel to a clearing deeper in the forest, a place where ancient stones formed a circle and the earth itself seemed to hum with old magic. The fever had reached its crescendo, her body hovering at the edge of transformation, and she understood now that the only way through was forward. No more running, no more hiding, no more distance. He lay her on the soft moss in the center of the stone circle, and even through the haze of pain, she could feel him trembling. Not with fear, she could sense that clearly through the bond. With the weight of what he was about to do, with the knowledge that this choice, made freely, would bind him irrevocably. I can't guarantee this will work, he said, his voice rough as gravel. I can't promise the curse will break. I can only promise that whatever happens next, we face it as one. I know, Maya whispered. He began to shift then, not fully, not into the massive wolf form she'd seen that night on the highway. Instead, he allowed the transformation to happen partially, his body caught in the liminal space between human and beast. His shoulders broadened and strengthened. His hands became something between fingers and claws. His eyes burned with golden wolf light, but his face remained recognizably his own, the form of an alpha in his purest power. Then he opened the bond completely. It was like standing in the center of an explosion. The connection between them, which had been growing steadily since the moment she'd put on the silver cuff, suddenly blazed into something vast and all-consuming. Maya could feel everything, not just his emotions, but his memories, his childhood under his father's brutal rule, the moment he'd decided to be different, the agony of losing Marin, the guilt that had eaten him alive, the 17 years of self-imposed isolation that had been both penance and prison. She felt his desire for her, Not just physical, though that was there too, a hunger that made her body respond despite the fever. But deeper, his need to have someone who understood him, someone who chose him despite knowing the cost, someone who could meet him in the darkness without flinching. And through it all, she felt the curse. It was a living thing, yes, but it was also small, contained. For 17 years, it had fed on his guilt and isolation, growing fat on his self-recrimination. But now that it was exposed to the light of mutual choice, now that it was facing not just one person's love, but two people's conscious decision to bind themselves regardless of consequence, it began to shrivel. It didn't disappear. The magic was too old, too deeply rooted for that. But it transformed. Instead of poison, it became something else, something that looked almost like scars in the fabric of their connection, reminders rather than infections. Maya arched upward, meeting his transformed body with her own human one, and the contrast, his strength, her vulnerability, the way he supported her without consuming her, felt like an answer. His clawed hands were careful against her skin, never breaking the surface, never drawing blood. His face, still recognizably his, pressed against her throat, breathing her in. The fever broke like a fever should, suddenly, dramatically, leaving her drenched in sweat and gasping. But she was alive, more than alive. She could feel her own wolf stirring beneath her skin, not in panic now, but in recognition. The part of her that carried shifter blood was awakening fully, drawn to the surface by the intensity of the bond. She could feel the shape of the transformation waiting in her bones, could sense the power of it, and for the first time, she understood what it meant to contain such magic. "Kyle," she gasped, and her voice sounded different, layered with harmonics that hadn't been there before. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his golden eyes searching her face. Slowly, deliberately, he allowed the shift to reverse fully, pulling back into his human form. His skin glistened with exertion, and there were new marks visible on his chest and arms. Not scars, but something else. The curse marks, she realized. The places where the dark magic had been woven into him. They were fading. "The bond is holding," he said, wonder in his voice. "I can feel it. The curse is still there, but it's dormant, contained. It's like—" He paused, searching for words. "It's like the poison turned into scar tissue, protection instead of infection." Maya reached up and touched the marks on his chest, tracing the patterns with her fingertips. Beneath her hands, she could feel his heartbeat steadying, feel the residual tremors of transformation fading. She could also feel something else, the way the silver threads of the bond had solidified, weaving through their connection so thoroughly that she couldn't tell where he ended and she began. "I can hear your thoughts," she said suddenly. "Not words, but intentions, emotions. I can feel what you're feeling." "That's the bond," Kyle said softly. "Complete mating bonds create a shared consciousness. Over time, you'll learn to modulate it, to give each other privacy when needed. But right now, at the beginning, you'll be aware of almost everything." "Is that okay?" Maya asked, suddenly nervous. "I don't want to intrude." "After 17 years of being alone in my own head," Kyle said, and his eyes were bright with something that looked like joy. "Having you inside my mind is the best thing I've ever experienced." A sound echoed through the forest then, a howl so pure and powerful it made the stones in the circle vibrate. It came from the territory beyond, and Maya understood immediately that it was the pack. Other wolves, responding to the completion of their alpha's bond. a primal acknowledgement of the change that had just rippled through their world. The curse marks on Kael's chest continued to fade. "We're not out of danger," Kael said, and she could feel the shift in his emotions, the return of caution, of strategic thinking. "The Corvus faction is still out there, and they won't take kindly to discovering that their curse has been neutralized. They'll see you as a threat now, as evidence that their magic failed." "Then we deal with them," Maya said, sitting up beside him. She felt different, stronger, more solid, as if completing the bond had anchored her in a way nothing else ever could. "Together." "Together," Kael agreed, and he pulled her close, pressing his forehead against hers. Through the bond, she felt his certainty and his fear in equal measure. The knowledge that the curse might not be truly broken, only transformed. That new dangers were approaching, that the life they'd chosen together would never be simple or safe. But underneath it all, she felt his absolute commitment to facing whatever came next. "I love you," she said, and meant it in the deepest way possible, not as fate or destiny, but as a choice made freely. "I love you," he replied, "and I choose you. Every day, every moment, even if the curse rises again." In the distance, the howls of the pack continued, a chorus of acknowledgement and warning in equal measure. The pack assembly happened at dawn. They gathered in the great hall of Kael's compound, a sprawling estate built into the mountainside, all dark wood and stone that seemed to have grown from the earth itself. Maya stood beside Kael on a raised platform, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. Shifters in human form, their bodies moving with the grace of contained predators, their expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion to outright hostility. She'd shifted for the first time that morning. Kael had guided her through it in the quiet of his private chambers, walking her through the sensation of bones reshaping, of skin stretching and reforming, of her human consciousness expanding to encompass something vastly more powerful. The wolf that emerged was smaller than Kael's massive alpha form, but fierce, built for speed and precision rather than brute strength. Her fur was silver gray, marked with the same moonlight shade as the cuff on her wrist, and bearing, across her left shoulder, the same curse mark that Kael carried, a visible symbol of their bonded status. "The assembly recognizes the completion of the Alpha's mate bond," a woman's voice called out from the gathered crowd. Eleanor, Maya realized, standing in formal witness position. "We acknowledge the union between Kael Thorne, Alpha of the Northern Territories, and Maya." "Thorne," Kael said quietly, and through the bond, Maya felt the weight of what he was claiming. Not just her as his mate, but her as his partner in leadership. Maya Thorne, co-alpha of the Northern Territories. A murmur rippled through the assembly, some approving, some distinctly not. A man stepped forward from the crowd, tall, with the bearing of someone used to authority, his scarred face marked with the intricate patterns of high rank. His eyes, when they fixed on Maya, were cold. "I challenge the legitimacy of this bond," he said, his voice carrying the weight of formal ritual. "The Corvus faction recognizes no authority granted through cursed magic. We challenge the Alpha's claim to leadership and demand trial by combat." Through the bond, Kael's fury was a living thing, but his voice remained controlled. "The Corvus faction has no standing to challenge. You curse the previous Alpha in violation of pack law. Your challenge is invalid." "The curse was justice," the man spat. "You were weak. You weakened our pack with mercy and compromise, And now you've bonded with an outsider, a half-blood human who carries traces of our own forbidden magic. You've contaminated the pure bloodlines. The bloodlines aren't pure, Eleanor said sharply, stepping forward. They never were. The strongest packs have always been those with genetic diversity and strong bonding practices. The Corvus faction clings to your father's ideology because it's the only power you've ever known. Silence, Oracle, the man snarled. This isn't your concern. It is, another voice called out, and Maya recognized Iris, stepping from the crowd. Her aunt looked small among the gathered shifters, but her presence radiated authority. I'm the witness to the bloodline claim. Maya carries the legacy of Ruth Thorne, the last alpha mate of the Eastern Territories before she chose a human husband. Her blood is as legitimate as Kael's. The scarred man's face darkened with rage. The bloodline died when Ruth abandoned her duty. This girl is nothing but a mistake born from betrayal. Maya felt something shift in her chest. Not pain, but a kind of crystalline clarity. She'd spent so much of this journey reacting to other people's choices, other people's fears. But standing here, in her wolf form, connected to Kael through a bond that thrummed with his absolute faith in her, she understood that it was time to claim her own voice. She stepped forward. The transformation back to human form was easier this time, a ripple of silver light rather than the violent upheaval of her first shift. She stood naked and unashamed in front of the assembled pack, meeting the scarred man's eyes directly. I don't care what you think my bloodline represents, she said, her voice steady and clear. I don't care what your faction believes about purity or legitimacy or weakness. What I know is this. I chose Kael. Not because fate demanded it, not because the curse forced me, but because he's worth choosing. Because he had the courage to face the darkness inside him instead of letting it consume him. Because he spent 17 years building something better than what his father left behind. You know nothing, the man snarled. You're an outsider playing at being pack. Then why does it terrify you so much? Maya asked. Why are you standing here challenging instead of simply accepting what's already done? You're not angry because I'm weak or illegitimate. You're angry because the curse didn't work. You're angry because the magic you built your entire faction's identity on, the magic you used to justify cruelty and control, failed, and that means you have to face the possibility that you were wrong. Through the bond, she felt Kael's shock and pride and overwhelming love all tangled together. The scarred man took a step forward, his body beginning to shift. I challenge you, girl. Trial by combat. If you're truly bonded to the Alpha, if you're truly pack, then fight like it. I accept, Maya said calmly. She felt Kael's surge of alarm through the bond, felt him moving forward, but she squeezed his hand, still human, still connected to him in the most basic way, and he understood. This was her battle to fight. The assembly formed a circle, their eyes gleaming with the hunger of predators watching a hunt. The scarred man shifted fully into his wolf form, massive, scarred, built for violence. He was older than her, far more experienced, and he had spent decades perfecting the art of combat. But Maya had something he didn't, a bond that meant she didn't have to fight alone. She shifted back into her wolf form, feeling Kael's strength flowing through her, not overriding her own power, but supporting it, amplifying it. She could feel the Corvus man's intentions before he acted, could sense his attack through the heightened awareness the bond provided. When he lunged, she was already moving. The fight was over in less than 3 minutes. She didn't kill him. The ritual didn't require death, only submission. When he lay pinned, bleeding from several deep cuts. She held him there until his body went limp in acknowledgement of defeat. Then she stepped back, allowing Eleanor to move in and begin binding the wounds with practiced efficiency. As she shifted back to human form, the assembly erupted in howls, sounds of acknowledgement, of respect, of the pack accepting her place among them. Kyle pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, and through the bond she felt the absolute truth of his heart. He had never doubted her. From the moment she'd made her choice, he had known she was capable of this. "Welcome home," he whispered, and the words carried the weight of ritual and promise. Maya rested her forehead against his chest, feeling his heartbeat sync with hers through the bond, and understood finally what Ruth had been trying to tell her. This wasn't destiny claiming her. This was her claiming her own power. 3 weeks of peace was all they got. 3 weeks of Maya learning the territories, of Kyle introducing her to the nuances of pack leadership, of nights spent in the stone circle where they'd completed their bond, wrapped in each other, and the knowledge that they'd survived the impossible. 3 weeks of the curse marks on Kyle's chest continuing to fade, becoming less scars and more like tattoos, reminders rather than wounds. Then the message came. It arrived on a moonless night, carried by a rogue wolf who bore the Corvus faction's insignia. The scarred man they'd defeated in ritual combat had called for reinforcements from the Western territories. Other packs, other factions who saw the new order Kyle had built as a threat to their own authority. They were gathering at the border, 200 strong, moving toward the heart of the Northern Territories with clear intent to reclaim the curse, to destroy Maya, and to restore the old ways. "They're afraid," Eleanor said, studying the message with grim intensity. "Fear makes people dangerous. The Corvus faction is losing followers. Your defeat of their champion has shown younger wolves that there's an alternative to their ideology. Now the old guard is trying to reassert control through force." "How long until they reach us?" Maya asked, though she could already sense it through the bond, a distant pressure, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. 2 days, Kyle said quietly. 3 if we're fortunate, and the weather turns against them. They had 2 days to prepare for a battle that would either secure Kyle's vision for the pack or destroy it entirely. The preparation was methodical and brutal. Kyle worked with his commanders to organize defensive positions, to identify which packs might be sympathetic to negotiation and which would fight regardless. Maya found herself drawn to Eleanor and Iris, who spent long hours in the old library beneath the compound, searching through centuries-old texts for any mention of the curse's origins, any hint of true dissolution magic. "Here," Iris said finally, her finger tracing a passage written in a language that predated English. "The curse bond can only be fully broken through sacrifice. Not the sacrifice of the cursed one. That would simply free the curse to infect another. But the sacrifice of the bonded mate." The words hung in the silence like a blade. "What kind of sacrifice?" Maya asked, though she feared she already knew. "Life force," Eleanor said softly. "A willing surrender of self, channeled through the bond to burn away the curse at its source. It's not death, exactly, more like a transformation. The mate becomes part of the curse magic itself, neutralizing it from within." "So I would cease to exist," Maya said flatly. "You would transform into something else," Iris corrected. "The old texts call it the celestial bond, a state where the mate becomes one with the magic itself, existing as a protective force rather than as a separate being. It's considered the highest honor in the old packs. It's also considered a myth," Eleanor added. No one's attempted it in living memory. The texts are unclear about whether the transformation is reversible. Through the bond, Maya felt Kael's growing awareness of the conversation. Before she could respond, he appeared in the library doorway, his expression dark with fury. Absolutely not, he said flatly. We're not discussing this. We have to discuss it, Maya said, standing to face him. If there's a way to truly break the curse, not at the cost of you, Kael said, moving toward her. I didn't spend 17 years alone and another 17 minutes bonded to you just to lose you to sacrifice. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Eleanor said gently. The curse was built on the foundation of the original Alpha's pain and isolation. It will always resurface, always find ways to poison connection, unless it's burned away completely. Through the bond, Maya could feel Kael's desperation and his absolute refusal to accept the possibility. But she could also feel something else, the truth of Eleanor's words resonating through the magic itself. The final battle began at dawn. The rogue forces came through the mountain pass like a wave, 200 strong, their wolf forms moving with the coordinated precision of trained warriors. Kael's pack met them in the valley north of the compound, a chosen battlefield that favored defensive positioning. The fighting was chaos. Maya found herself in her wolf form, fighting beside Kael, her new shifter instincts guiding her through combat with a kind of primal clarity. She was smaller than most of the Corvus fighters, but faster, and the bond allowed her to anticipate Kael's movements, to fight as an extension of his will rather than as a separate entity. But they were being pushed back. The Western pack forces were larger, more experienced in sustained combat. By midday, Maya could sense the shift in the tide, the realization that they couldn't win through force alone. That was when she felt it, the pull of the curse, suddenly sharp and demanding. It wasn't spreading this time. Instead, it was calling to her, beckoning her toward the center of the battlefield, toward a place of power where the magic itself seemed to concentrate. Kael sensed it through the bond and tried to block her path, but she pushed through, understanding in that moment what had to happen. She shifted back to human form in the center of the chaos, vulnerable and exposed, and opened herself completely to the curse. Maya! Kael's roar was part wolf, part human, pure anguish. The curse flooded through her, not to destroy, but to be destroyed. She could feel its age, its hunger, its desperate need to exist. And she could feel the ancient magic that Eleanor and Iris had described waiting in the depths of her being. The celestial bond. She reached for it with her entire being, drawing the curse in, accepting it, burning it with the light of her own magic. The transformation happened in waves, her body becoming translucent, then luminous, then something that existed only partially in the physical world. She was becoming something new. The fighting stopped. Both packs stood frozen as they watched the woman in the center of the battlefield transform into a pillar of silver light. The curse screamed, a sound that was part magic, part death cry, and then it shattered. The light faded, leaving Maya standing in the center of the battlefield, but changed. Her skin had a luminescence to it now, visible even in daylight. Her eyes held depths that seemed to look into other worlds. And through the bond, Kael could feel her presence, not diminished, but transformed into something vaster. She was still herself, but she was also more. "I'm here," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that made the ground tremble. "The curse is gone, burned away, and I'm still alive." Kael shifted back to human form and ran toward her, pulling her into his arms. Through the bond, she could feel his relief, his joy, his absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. The celestial bond, Eleanor breathed, stepping forward to witness. It's real. The old magic is real. The Western Pack forces began to retreat, their leaders recognizing that the curse, the foundation of their authority, was truly broken. The Corvus faction collapsed without its magical leverage. As the sun set over the valley, Kyle held his mate in his arms, and Maya understood finally that destiny and choice weren't opposites. They were the same thing, viewed from different angles. 6 months later, the stone circle had become a place of pilgrimage. Shifters from territories across the region came to witness the site where the curse had been broken, where an outsider had become a legend, where the old magic had proven itself not as a tool of domination, but as a force of transformation. Maya didn't encourage the visits, but she didn't discourage them either. The circle had become a symbol, proof that the old ways didn't have to mean the violent ways. She sat on the moss-covered stones now, her luminescent skin catching the late afternoon light, and felt Kyle's presence approaching long before she saw him. The bond between them had settled into something comfortable and deep, a constant awareness that was no longer overwhelming, but rather grounding. She could feel his contentment as he moved through the forest, could sense the weight of his day as pack leader, and the lightness that came when he was near her. "The Western delegation has agreed to your terms," he said, settling beside her and taking her hand. The touch was familiar now, though it never failed to send a warm current through the bond. "They'll recognize the new coalition structure, and they're willing to send representatives to the spring councils." "That's good," Maya said. "Eleanor thinks the unified leadership model will hold if we can get 3 more territories to commit." Kyle smiled, and through the bond she felt his amazement at how far they'd come. 6 months ago, I would have said unifying the territories was impossible. Now you're making it look inevitable. "We're making it look inevitable," Maya corrected. "You're the one who had the vision for change. I'm just helping you build it." It was true, in a way. The celestial bond had transformed her in unexpected ways. She could still shift into her wolf form, could still fight and run and hunt with the pack. But she could also exist in a state of partial transformation, moving between worlds, speaking languages that predated human speech. The curse had burned away, but its magic, purified and redirected, had become part of her being. She was the bridge between the old magic and the new. Behind them, in the clearing beyond the stone circle, preparations were underway for the bonding ceremony of 2 younger pack members. Iris and Eleanor were arranging flowers, directing the gathering of refreshments, moving with the purposeful energy of women who understood ritual and magic in equal measure. "Ruth would be proud," Kyle said softly, following her gaze. "I think she would," Maya agreed. She still thought about her grandmother often, about the choices Ruth had made, the sacrifice she'd offered through careful bloodline maintenance, the letter that had changed everything. She knew this was possible. She just had to wait for me to be ready to accept it. "Are you?" Kyle asked. "Ready, I mean. Not just for the bonding ceremonies or the territorial negotiations, but for everything that comes after. For a life that's going to be complicated and never entirely safe, and always under scrutiny from people who don't understand what we've built." Maya leaned against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "I'm ready for a life with you," she said. "Everything else is secondary." Through the bond, she felt his satisfaction, but also a deeper question he'd been holding back for weeks. "I have something I want to ask you," he said carefully. "When you're ready to hear it." "I'm ready now," Maya said. Kael shifted, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a small silver box. Inside was a ring, not made of silver, but of something that looked like solidified moonlight, threaded with dark metal that matched the curse marks they both carried. It's made from the curse. Eleanor had explained it to Maya weeks ago when Kyle had asked for her blessing on the gift. The parts that burned away, transformed into something beautiful. A reminder that even what tries to destroy us can become precious if we're willing to face it. Marry me, Kyle said simply. Not because the bond requires it, not because fate demands it, but because I want to spend the rest of my life making the choice to love you every single day. Because you're my co-alpha, my mate, my partner in building something that's never existed before. Because you're the person who taught me that isolation isn't strength, it's just loneliness wearing a brave face. Yes, Maya said, and the word felt like coming home. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, warm against her skin, pulsing with a gentle magic that synchronized with her heartbeat. The moment it settled, the bond flared with brilliance, and somewhere in the territory, the pack howled in acknowledgement. Word traveled fast through the connection between shifters. The alpha had claimed his mate formally. The union was absolute. That evening, as the bonding ceremony for the younger pair unfolded beneath a canopy of stars, Maya stood beside Kyle and felt the weight of everything they'd survived to reach this moment. The storm on the highway where she'd first seen him, the fever that had nearly consumed her, the curse she'd burned away to save him. All of it had led here, to this clearing, this moment, this certainty. Iris caught her eye across the ceremony space and smiled, a smile that held grief and pride and the knowledge of ancestral sacrifice finally bearing fruit. Eleanor was watching too, her expression the serene satisfaction of someone who'd seen the prophecies written in the old magic come to pass. I love you, Kyle said, squeezing her hand as the couple before them exchanged their own vows. I love you too, Maya replied, even on the days when you're being stubborn about territorial politics. Especially on those days, Kyle said, and she could feel his amusement through the bond. Those are the days I need to remember why I'm building all of this. After the ceremony, when the celebration had faded into quiet conversation and the younger wolves had begun to pair off for the traditional hunt, Kyle led Maya back to the stone circle. This time they weren't alone. The forest itself seemed to acknowledge their presence, the trees leaning inward as if witnessing something sacred. Ruth left something else for you, Kyle said, handing her a sealed envelope. Eleanor kept it, waiting for the right moment. Inside was another letter, written in Ruth's careful hand. My dearest Maya, if you're reading this, then you've already made your choice and paid your price. You've learned what I spent a lifetime trying to teach your mother. That magic is not a burden to be denied, but a gift to be embraced. That love is worth the cost. That sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose the messy, complicated, dangerous path instead of the safe one. Kyle is a good man. He was always going to be a good man, but he needed someone to believe in him, not because he was fated to be loved, but because he was worth loving. Thank you for being that person. The curse is broken now, and that was always the goal. But more importantly, you've broken something else. The cycle of pain that runs through the old packs. You've shown them that strength doesn't come from domination, that leadership doesn't require cruelty, that the old magic can be wielded for creation instead of destruction. That's your real legacy, my darling. Not the bloodline, not the bond, not even the magic. It's the world you're building with Kyle, one where shifters can be both fierce and kind, both powerful and choosing, both individual and connected. I'm proud of you. I always was. With all my love, Ruth Maya held the letter against her chest and felt Kyle's presence surrounding her. Not overwhelming, but protective, safe. Ready to go home? He asked. Yes, she said, taking his hand. Let's go home. As they walked back through the forest toward the compound, toward the life they were building together, Maya understood that this was what the curse had always been protecting against. The possibility that love could be strong enough to transform darkness into light. That choice could be more powerful than destiny. That sometimes the greatest magic comes not from blood or magic, but from two people deciding, over and over again, that they were worth fighting for. The forest sang around them as the moon rose overhead, full and bright and eternal.